Hi there, this is Shauna from the Foiled Fox. I'm so glad you're with me today. It's been a long time. Sorry it's taken a while, but I am back and I'm sharing a penny black flower of the month. It's something new for them, tulips in bloom. There's the project we're going to be working on, and it's just great. So let's look at the stamps. Here's the wellies or gardening boots and a sentiment with its matching die. And then the tulips, which is tulips in bloom, with a sentiment, the an envelope, a grid pattern. It has everything you need and a little sentiment there. So you can see here are the dies together. I'm sorry, the stamps together, and now the dies together, and they all work in tandem. And then I needed a little decorative tag, and so I found one in my stash from Whimsy Stamps, and I'm going to be using that. And then I'm using a rectangle die. I chose this A6 layering dies from Waffle Flower because it's a little bit more elongated in my project as a 5x7. And then I'm going to be using some inks. This is Scattered Straw, Mowed Lawn, and Wild Honey, and some re-inkers. Chip Sapphire, Blueprint Sketch are going to be for my boots. And then I have the Wild Honey, Scattered Straw, and Mowed Lawn, and Crushed Olive. I like to use the re-inkers because they're real intense. Now for the papers, I'm using a hot press watercolor. You can use cold press if you like. And then I have some pieces of Nina White cardstock and a piece of green, kind of limey green. So I have a 5x7 uh, when folded card base. I have a panel that's 5x7 that fits on there perfectly. And then I have another panel that is slightly smaller that fits inside that. And it has just that little bit of an edge to it. So we're going to, those are the papers that we're going to be using. And that small panel, we're using that rectangle die. That's where I'm going to cut that out and make a window. But let's set this all aside except for the hot press and get to the real meat of it, which are the flowers and the boots. I have this in my stamp position. I have all the stamps I'm going to be using and not the grid right now. And the paper is mounted. That's hot press, um, or what any kind of watercolor paper you like. I'm going to use a dot. See how tiny that dot is of Blueprint Sketch and Chip Sapphire. I'm going to start there because we're going to start on the boots. I have a Chip Sapphire cube. I like using the cubes because it's easy for me to get into smaller areas and stamp that way. But of course, you know, the full size ink pads work just as well. I like also putting everything on in my stamp position at one time because that way I can just go right to the next and I don't have to spend a lot of time repositioning it. But I'm stamping this with the Chip Sapphire, the wellies, our little gardening boots, and I have some water. I have a small paintbrush, and I'm going to start out with Blueprint Sketch. And I have a moist brush, and I'm just brushing on some water and putting on a little bit of color. And I'm going to continue to add layers of color here. Starting out, like I say, with the Blueprint Sketch. It's a little bit more, it has a lighter blue color to it than the Chip Sapphire, but we're going to go back and use the Chip Sapphire for a lot of our shading. But I like how these two work nicely together to get me the color of boot that I'm looking for. And I'm just making sure I'm putting color onto the right, and then with a damp brush, I'm blending to the left. So I'm putting on, here is a good example here, I'm putting on the dark color, and then I'm blending that to the left with my damp brush. And that way I don't get too intense. I'm not coloring the entire boot all one color because I want a little bit of shading to this so that it shows more dimension. And I'm just going to continue with this principle um, of putting more color to the left, and in this case, down at the bottom of the boot, and then blending out towards the left or at the bottom of the boot towards the top of the boot. I want to be very, very careful not to add too much ink, especially as I go towards the left. The way to kind of counteract that is to add more intensity to the right, which is what I want to continue to do. I want to continue to add layer and layers of color. If you put it all on at one time, it kind of looks all monotone. This way, if you do it a little bit at a time, it takes a little bit more time, but it gets you more the result that you're looking for. Gets you that shading and that definition. So I'm just going to continue in using these two color paints, just the blueprint sketch and the blue sapphire. And there's a little loop at the top of this boot. We'll just get that colored in. And I'll continue to add more and more color to it. If you want to dab off a little bit of the ink, you can do that by just taking a clean facial tissue or paper towel and just dab off a little of that excess ink. And now you can see for the other boot behind it, which is in the background, I've made that one dark and then blending a little bit lighter to the left. That way, again, it shows that that's in the background, the other boot's in the foreground. And then for the soles here, the rubber soles, I'm using pumice stone and black soot. First pumice stone and then black soot towards the bottom and the back of the heel. And you can see there how that all comes together and just adds a little bit of shading. It doesn't take much to do that. Now I'm going to go and crisp up my lines here by stamping this again with the chip sapphire. And I'm not pressing really hard, just giving it a gentle crisping up, because as we went over it with the water over, as the stamped image, then it got a little bit blurry, so you can crisp it up by just doing that at the end. Wait for it to dry a little bit though. Now I'm using the mowed lawn and the scattered straw, and I'm stamping the bloom and then the leaves. I'm going to start out with adding more to my little palette here. I have the crushed olive and mowed lawn for the greenery. I also like to use some Tombow pens. I'm using 131 and 158, but you can use, just continue to use your crushed olive and your mowed lawn, and a little bit of peel paint works nicely. I like using the Tombow pens. They're easy to use. They're easy to put in a splash of color, especially in those smaller areas. But you don't need to do it that way if you don't want to. Like I say, you can just add a peel paint to your palette here, along with the crushed olive and the mowed lawn. I'm using the same principle where I'm going to add a little bit of darkness towards the bottom of the leaves and the interior of the leaves to give it a little bit more definition. And I love using crushed olive to begin with because it gives me that lime, that kind of yellow green actually. And it works very nicely to give you that lighter shade. So I'm just going to continue to add a little bit of the green and blend it out exactly like I did before, making my brush a little bit damp there and blending it out towards the lighter area. Now on to the blossom. I'm using scattered straw and wild honey. Now you see when I put that dot, and these are tiny dots of the I'm sorry, it's not scattered straw. It is mustard seed. I'm mistaken. I'm sorry about that. I used the scattered straw for the stamping, but not for this actual to get this really bright yellow. It is mustard seed. And now I'm adding a little bit of that wild honey. Wild honey is a little more orangey yellow, where mustard seed is really a vibrant, true yellow. And that's what I use for the body of this, even though I stamped it in the scattered straw. Just want to make sure you're real clear that I misspoke earlier. So I'm just adding where I needed some shadows, the wild honey. And I'm going to now take the wild honey and just lightly stamp that blossom again, and just tiny bit of the mowed lawn. And then just kind of, I always have to fiddle, of course. And so I continue to just kind of add a little bit of the shading towards the bottom and give it a little bit of a roundness look to it and more dimension. Now, I purposely waited for the boot to get a little bit drier. So I have some Winsor Newton white gouache. Now, you can use white ink or a Bosco pen or something like that. I chose the gouache because the gouache is going to have a little bit of translucency, so it's not going to be like this really bold white. And I'm putting dots. Now, I'm in love with these dots for this boot because it just adds a little bit of fun to them and makes them a little bit different. You don't want to add too many dots, but just enough. And you're going to add it to the back too. And, you're going to maybe put some half dots on there where it meets up to the boot in the foreground, because part of it might be covered up in real life. So I just added that little bit, and now we're going to go back to the flowers. I'm not going to show you every flower, but I'm going to me painting every flower, I should say, because we will need to have 3 flowers and a couple of buds. But I'm showing you this one because I'm adding Festive Berry to our palette. I stamped it in the scattered straw. I'm using the mustard seed and adding the yellow. Now I'm going to add just that touch of Festive Berry, and it gives it a little bit different look to it, which I wanted some differences. So I really like the pink that goes with it. So I'm just going to continue on with this, but I wanted to show you that it's again I'm using the Festive Berry as my shading color, and then intensify it a little bit more with the mustard seed. And you can see by what's on my palette how tiny little dots I'm using. Now, I'm going to be using, just like before, the crushed olive and the mowed lawn, and a little bit of my Tombow pan for that more peeled paint look, color, but you can use peel paint if you want. Now, as I mentioned, I want to mention again, you can use just your ink pads for all of this and just squish it onto a palette. I'm just using an acrylic palette here. You can find all the supplies down in the link below. But I use the reinkers because of their intensity of color, and I love being able to get that super intense, vibrant color. So, and as I mentioned, the Tombow pens give you a little bit of more of a easy control in smaller areas. See, I stamped it again in the wild honey like I did the other one, even though I used the Festive Berry. Now, I'm going to just really quickly show you a bud. This one I'm going to use quite a bit more, using the same technique, doing the greens and then doing the yellow, but I'm going to use a lot more of the Festive Berry. Because buds are a little bit more intense in color usually because they're folded up. And not opening up. Now you can see I went ahead and I did another blossom, another bud, and a leaf. And now I'm going to take all of these dies and I'm going to cut them out. Now there's all my cut out. That was magic. Cut out all of the flowers and the wellies. And now I took that rectangle die and I'm going to cut out of that small panel. As you can see, I have my card base. It was 5x7. I have the panel that fits on top, 5x7, and then this one is slightly smaller. And I'm going to cut the window out of that one. And now I have the window out of it, and I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of my window panel. But right now I'm going to I've mounted that grid pattern, and I'm using some anti-static powder because I'm going to stamp it with Versamark ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss it with white embossing powder. And the anti-static helps keep the embossing powder particles from sticking in places they shouldn't be sticking. But it's a challenge. At least it's a challenge for me. Now, this is just white embossing powder. You can use any white embossing powder you might have. My favorites are Ranger and Hero Arts. And you can, again, the supplies are linked down below. There's a link that'll take you to all the supplies that you can take a look at. Now I'm just heat embossing this. And once this is very uneventful to watch it being heat embossed white on white. But now I'm going to take an ink dauber, and I'm going to just start with scattered straw and add yellow over all of it. Now the pattern's really going to come to life. And then from on the right lower corner going up diagonally, I'm going to use a little bit of the wild honey just so it has more intensity. Now, as I said, I put the foam tape on the back of my window panel. I'm now going to use a tape runner to add this to my panel, to my card base. So that's my 5x7. Then I'm going to take that piece that we just embossed, and I'm going to figure out just exactly where that should go based on my panel, my window panel, I should say. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball that and get an idea. I'm not going to push it down yet because I might want to move it a little tiny bit. And sure enough, and so now I'm going to push it down a little bit, and there we go. Now to the oddly satisfying task of pulling off the release papers off of the back of this tape, this foam tape, and then I'm going to mount this right on top. Now we're zooming right along. We have all of our pieces basically done except for the sentiment. So I'm going to just do a little trimming, a little arranging. I have some foam squares on the back of my flowers so that they'll stick them down. It's an easy way to stick something down and arrange it. And I'm going to bend that a little bit because I want it to kind of flop down a little bit. And we just have to do a little bit of flower arranging. And then, see, we have that all ready for our sentiment. Now, if you remember, that was my decorative tag. You could choose anything that you have. But this is a whimsy stamp tag. I have a little scrap of kind of limey green paper. And I'm going to stamp this sentiment, which I really like. Happiness blooms from within. And I'm going to stamp it with Versamark ink onto this tag that I cut out. And I'm going to white heat emboss it like I did before. And again, you be sure to use your anti-static powder so you try to limit those little errant particles of embossing powder getting in places they just simply don't belong. Now I added some more, I've added my embossing powder, and I heat embossed it off camera. Don't need to be bored with that. And then I added on some foam tape to the back and pressed it on, and voila, our project is done. And I'm really pleased with it. I hope you liked it because I certainly was very pleased with it. Is a close-up of it so you can really get a good look at it. And then I am going to share with you some inspiration that Jill Foster from Penny Black has done for Penny Black. You can see here she used the wellies with different flowers, but also the tulips, and then she changed it up by using the post um, stamp and die, and then some other things that she used, the other products of Penny Black she used. But that was just a quick way you can get some inspiration from it. And then for a recap, we use the Tulips in Bloom, the Rain and or Shine. It should be, I think, Rain and Shine. I'm not sure. Stamp and die set, and then the various distress inkers. But again, everything is in the supply list down below, and you can check it out there. I want to thank you so much for being with me today. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.